Hello everybody, I thought we could sit down and do a bit of a mid-year review of my knitting now. Two things. The first thing, I am well aware that it is no longer the middle of the year. We are all just going to, conveniently, forget that. The second thing is, I am really hot right now. It is more than 30 degrees outside. I'm really warm, so we're going to get through this as quick as we can, hopefully. If it seems like I've cut out large breaks between segments, it's probably because I have needed to cool down. So, potentially not the best idea to show you all of my knitwear thus far, but that's what I'm going to do. I have been seeing a lot of these videos on Instagram in kind of short format, like reels, and I really enjoy them. I'm a really nosy person. A lot of them are kind of creators showing the 6 or 7 sweaters or cardigans that they have made this year, and that's fantastic. I love that for them. However, that is not how I knit. I don't knit that fast. I work a full-time job, etc. So I thought I would show you what I have knit so far this year as someone who isn't churning out garments quite as fast as other people potentially. I will hold them up. So there you go. It's still a pretty hefty stack. I have got in this pile 1 sweater, 3 sleeveless tops. One of those is a sweater vest, 2 of them are summer tops, knitted at a DK weight, and 2 accessories. The one thing not pictured here is a Oslo hat for my partner. Which I will put a picture of on screen. I knitted this in about 3 days in a sort of mad rush before his birthday. And this is a pattern by PetiteKnit. I'm not going to really talk about this because I don't have it with me. And that was kind of a specific project for specific purpose, kind of as a gift knit for him. But that is the only thing missing from this pile. I might not mention everything about these projects. They will all be accounted for somewhere on this channel. So you can go back and look at previous videos and maybe find one that's got the project you're looking for in the thumbnail, and then you should be able to find it. But I will just talk to you about what I liked about them, what I didn't like about them, what my reflections are, those sorts of things. But I will put all the details in terms of pattern names, yarns used, etc. in the comments, so in the description box below. So if you are looking for anything in particular, it should be in there. And if it's not, feel free to leave a comment and ask me, and I will be happy to tell you. So we will start with the biggest thing first, and that is my maple sweater. And this was a test knit for Knitsfordays DK. I knitted this in Sandnes Garn Sunday, held double, along with Alpaca 1 by Isager, and I knitted it in a kind of pale dusty green colourway, which I really love. This is a test knit that I started before the year and finished before Christmas and finished after the new year. And this is the one and only test knit I will be doing this year. I have applied to another test knit, but I was rejected, so the test knit gods were with me, because I made some resolutions at the start of the year. Maybe not resolutions, kind of guidelines for how I wanted my knitting to go this year, kinds of ins and outs, things I wanted more of, less of. And one of the things I wanted less of was test knitting, and actually what I wanted was no test knitting. We have been tempted, but it's fine. I haven't done any more test knitting. That was the last thing, the most recent garment that I test knitted. It's not that it wasn't a positive experience. I have just decided that knitting a sweater on a sort of 6-week or 8-week timeline isn't quite as feasible for me, and that's not the kind of test knit that I feel able to participate in anymore, or want to participate in, really. So in terms of knitting more mindfully this year, I guess, or knitting with more intention, that's a tick. No more test knits. Beautiful. I also think that jumper is a real staple basic. It was a skill extender. It was the first time that I had done cables in a garment. I used to knit just like swatches of cables when I was younger. I don't know if anyone else did that as a child, just like knit swatches of different stitches and then just like left them in squares around the house and never did anything with them. I think I had the bright idea that I would sew them into a blanket one day, but I also couldn't really do blanket stitch, so nothing ever happened with those. So this was the first time that I'd actually done cables properly in a garment, and it was really easy. I didn't use a cable needle. It came out looking the way I wanted it to. I like the wide arms. I like the fact that they don't have decreases in them. It's a really good staple for me. I wore it a lot in the cooler months at the start of this year, so I'm confident that will continue to be a staple. And that was another thing that I wanted to do this year, which was knit more of those kind of basics, I guess, to make sure that I've got those in my wardrobe, because that's definitely a gap in my wardrobe at the moment, particularly with my knitting. So I'm really happy I did that project, really happy I participated in the test knit, really happy that I won't be doing any more. That was the first thing, I think, maybe, that I finished this year. The second thing I shall talk to you about is my Novice Slipover. This is by PetiteKnit. I knitted this in Gepard Woolia in the colour navy. The reason I mention that is this was leftover yarn, and one of the things I wanted to do this year was find a way to use some of my stash. I don't have a very big stash. I have 2 A3 sized kind of shelf crates. You know, those like colourful ones you can get from like Soster & Grin and IKEA. I have 2 of those, A3 sized, and they're like stackable. And I've got 2 that are slightly smaller than A4 sized, and that is the extent of my yarn stash. And that includes all my scraps, it includes all my upcoming projects. So I don't really keep like sweater quantities or garment quantities in stash without a plan to use them in the near future. However, I have now accumulated a little bit of stash, a little bit of scrap yarn particularly, having been knitting for a few years actively. And I wanted to come up with some ways that I could maybe use some of that this year in a way that felt meaningful and purposeful and wasn't just for the sake of using scrap yarn. And this was a really good way of doing that, because not only did it use almost all of this scrap yarn, but I got to teach one of my friends to knit while I was working on this alongside them. And that was a really lovely experience, because now they are also a very obsessed knitter, and we're going on a trip to Copenhagen together, pretty much just so that we can go yarn shopping. So I got everything I wanted out of that. So this is the Novice Sweater, Novice Slipover. It's a really basic pattern. It's a great pattern. I think what I value most about this was being able to teach my friend to knit, and as an example of kind of finding use for my scraps. I will say about this yarn though, it does pill quite easily, and I held this with nothing, so there is nothing to strengthen it. So I'm a little more precious about it, but there you go. That is the other kind of wintry garment that I made. I've then got a couple of accessories, and they're kind of a little bit transitional. Well, one of them is. I will use them to transition into my summer garments. So this is a scarf. I don't actually want to put that on because it's really, really warm. This is also leftover yarn, so continuing the trend of finding a use for all of my leftover yarn. This is, what is this? It is Majo Garn merino in the colour anemone, and I've said that a million times on this podcast. It was a yarn that I used for my very first ever knitted garment. That was it's the Darling Wrap by Knitting for Olive, which was a really fun experience. I learnt lots of skills, however, not the right garment for me, to be honest. Probably not the best first pattern either. It's bottom up for a start. I reclaimed that yarn and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it for a long time, and then I actually decided I was just going to knit a tube scarf, because I literally don't have a single scarf in my collection. I don't even have store-bought scarves at this point. And that was just a really peaceful, mindless knitting experience. And it meant I put that yarn towards something that was actually wearable and functional. I love the colour. I didn't follow any pattern. I basically used the broad guidelines for the Vienna scarf. I basically just used the stitch counts a little bit and the needle size and the gauge suggestions to find a gauge that worked for this scarf and to find the dimensions that I wanted. And that was literally it. And it matches my penny gloves, which is fantastic. 10 out of 10, love that. So that's the other winter accessory that I have. And then I've got a more transitional one. So this one is also in the spirit of using stash yarn. So I'm doing really well here, so well. This is the Marielle scarf by Marielle's Verden. This is Filcolana Merci in the colourway Duckling, and I used this on a different project, a Cumulus blouse by PetiteKnit. Didn't really like it in that project, didn't come out of it with a very good impression of the yarn. And actually now that I've made this, it's completely changed that. I was just using this yarn for the wrong thing. So this is 50% superwash merino and 50% cotton. And actually I really love it in this accessory. I really love the colour. I get wear out of it even in the summer as a kind of layer over my shoulders or as a bit of accessory around my waist. I really enjoy the pointelle inspired lace work. This was the reason that I decided to knit this pattern, and that has been a really exciting kind of change in my knitting, because now I just feel so drawn to knitting lace. It just feels so exciting, and for something that is literally just increases, decreases, yarn overs, like, you can create so many exciting patterns, which I think is really cool. And off the back of that, I decided that I wanted to do more lace knitting this year, and that is exactly what I'm doing, and I will mention that again in a little bit. So that, I should also say actually, thus far, every single project that I have shown you is something that was cast on the previous year. This was cast on the previous year. I was going to say maybe 2 years, but I think it was the previous year. So none of these projects were things that I started in 2026. Okay, these are all things that I carried into 2026. This took me almost a year to knit. It was on quite small needles. I think I used a 3.5. I might be wrong about that. I would check the previous podcast where I talk about this. I would go find that podcast. So some of these things took time to make, and you know what? That's fine. There are, however, 2 things that I started and finished this year. They are both summer tops. And these are both tops that have allowed me to extend my skills as well. So I made an entire sort of vlog, I guess, about the process of designing this top, of knitting this top. This is my self-drafted peplum top. There you go. Sorry for the creases. It's been in my wardrobe, my drawers. And this is in Sandnes Garn Line. This was a yarn that I discovered last year and I just love it. It's fantastic. It's machine washable. It's DK weight. It doesn't make me hot and sweaty. It's great. I really love this colour as well. I love the colour range of Sandnes Garn Line, actually. They have some really, really good colours, would highly recommend. One of the things I also wanted to do this year was reduce the amount of kind of wool in my summer garments. And so far, the garments that I've made have all been made out of Sandnes Garn Line or Drop Spell. I'm using Drop Spell at the moment. So that has been pretty successful. I've been quite happy that I've stuck to the yarns that I know I like and that I know that I'll wear and get use out of. This top was a huge experiment and a really gratifying experience because it was based on a design that I had made previously. Didn't fit quite right, was the wrong yarn, and I decided I wanted to have another go of kind of self-drafting. And in doing so, I learned a lot about knitting for your own body and for your own measurements and things like that, and kind of built up my confidence to tailor things to fit me. And that is a skill that I also really wanted to work on this year. I have a decent number of patterns. There are an infinite number of patterns that I would love to knit, but I'm never going to get to knit all of them. And there are only so many basic knit patterns that I need. I wanted to be able to modify the patterns I already own to be the garments that I want. And knitting this self-drafted top kind of built up my confidence to do that. And so, with another lot of Sandnes Garn Line, I made this top. And that's exactly what I did with this as well. Now, you won't have seen this on the podcast yet because I haven't filmed a podcast episode since. So I will talk about this very briefly. This is the cloud top, but modified by PetiteKnit, obviously. I was very drawn to the mismatched button trend, so I put a button band down the middle. Yes, it is a real button band. Don't know why I did that. I guess it means I can undo it if I really want to, although I haven't. And I also put some waist increases. No, they're hip increases. I didn't put any waist decreases in, but I did put hip increases in to create a bit of an A-line shape. And I'm really pleased with how this came out. I didn't do the ribbing at the bottom, which is in the pattern, just because I felt like it made the bottom look a bit heavy. And I am really happy with how this came out. I'm really glad that I had the confidence to modify a pattern I already own. And I really loved kind of having the creativity to kind of just make decisions to go off-piste a little bit. And I really enjoyed picking the buttons out. I've gone for like whites, browns, burgundies, like dark reds and pale yellows. And I think they look really good together. So this is my most recent finished knit. And I have worn this a couple of times. I've got decent wear out of everything I've made this year, which is a good marker of success to me. I would say the thing that I wear the least is the Novice Slipover, although that is possibly because I finished it just on the cusp of spring, and at that point I was too warm to be wearing a wool slipover, a wool sweater vest. So we'll see come winter again how much wear I get out of that. But thus far I've worn everything and I've enjoyed everything, which I think is a real big win. That doesn't always happen. So those are the things that I have knit this year. What about the last few months of the year? So I'll tell you what I'm working on at the moment. I've got a couple of things on the go. I have this textured sweater. It is the Maude Sweater, I want to say, by Coco Amour Knitwear. And I'm knitting this in hand-dyed yarn. I've been knitting this for maybe a couple of years, like feels like maybe forever. I started knitting something else with this yarn, didn't like it, repurposed it. It sat around for a while and then I started making this. This is another example of using stash yarn. Fantastic, 10 out of 10. This is also another example of knitting lace because it's got lace panels in it and I really enjoy that. I'm hoping that I will finish that this year. I'm not working on it in the summer because it's boiling. So I'm hoping that is something I'll finish. And that is an example of more lace knitting that I'm doing, which is one of the things that I really wanted to do more of this year. So I feel good about that. The other thing that I'm actively working on at the moment, and I think I did an update on this in the last podcast, maybe, is the Seashore skirt by Kutovakika. Sorry if you can hear the clanking of needles. I don't know, I'll hold it in front of my face in case that's better. I don't know if you can see the lace pattern here. It's very beautiful. And this is also more lace knitting. Who'd have guessed? It's also a skirt, which is the first time I have ever knitted a skirt. And a couple of years ago, I made a knitting bingo. Let me see if I can find it. There's my knitting bingo. I don't know if you'll be able to read any of that, so I will put a picture in so that you can kind of see it a bit better. But I've been doing this for the last couple of years. I did actually get bingo on the 24th of May, 2026. So there you go. And this is something that I come back to when I want to feel inspired by my knitting, or I'm not quite sure what direction I want to go in next. And it has things on it, lots of things that I'd never done before, lots of things that I have now completed, but sort of things that push me a little bit. One of the things on here at the bottom, represented by this picture here, is a skirt. And to be honest, I did not think I would be knitting a lace skirt, but here we are. I'm really enjoying it. It's actually so much fun. It's so easy because you're just going round and round and round, but there's a lace repeat, so it actually makes it quite interesting. So I'm really pleased with that, because not only am I doing more lace knitting, which is what I wanted to do, but also it feels really exciting and it's something new, and I feel like I'm learning new skills, which is really fun. I feel like I've done a pretty good job with the things that I want less of this year. In fact, I've achieved literally all of them so far. So that was less test knitting, less spontaneously casting on new to me patterns, haven't done that. Animal fibres and summer garments, none of that. And no cropped bodies and sleeves. And so far we haven't had any of those, which is fantastic. I would like to, with the rest of the year, do slightly more of the things I wanted more of. So I would like to knit slightly ahead of season still. I feel like I've been starting to get that, particularly with the summer garments. I started quite early with that. I would like to continue with that. I feel like I've done a pretty good job so far entering into the world of pattern modifications, but there's just so much more that I can kind of explore there, and I'm sure some of it will go wrong, but that's absolutely fine. I would like to do more wearable basics. I think that's the only thing I haven't really nailed down yet. Something that I would like to at least cast on this year is the Maude Sweater by PetiteKnit, and I have some yarn in stash that I would like to use for that, so I feel like that's a pretty achievable aim. But that is where I am at with my knitting this year. I appreciate that was kind of a whistle-stop tour, but I hope you enjoyed having a little overview of what I have knit this year, having a little look forwards to kind of what I might want to knit in the future. I'm having a great time doing loads of lace knitting. I'm sure eventually that obsession will die off and I'll move on to the next thing, but right now I'm enjoying my lace. Let me know what you are working on at the moment. Tell me what you have been knitting this year. Do you do a make 9? I don't, because I could never convince myself to commit to a make 9. Do you do a knitting bingo? What's on your knitting bingo? Yeah, tell me what you've been working on, what you've made so far this year. If you have any big plans for the rest of the year, I would love to hear it. I hope you all have a lovely week. I hope if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, you are not too hot at the moment. It feels like everyone is experiencing heat waves, and yeah, the climate crisis is really scary. So that's a slightly bleak note to end on. If you are playing Yarn Chicken this week, I hope you win. Bye everyone.